Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Knox Ballard squinted at the blueprints spread across his desk, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the window of his home office. At 42, he had built a reputation as one of Denver's most innovative architects, known for structures that seemed to defy gravity and conventional wisdom alike. His colleagues called him the calculator for his meticulous attention to detail and his almost supernatural ability to spot structural weaknesses before they became catastrophic failures. "Dad," Knox looked up to see his 16-year-old daughter, Willow, hovering in the doorway. She had his sharp blue eyes, but her mother's honeyed blonde hair, a genetic cocktail that made her both strikingly beautiful and impossible to say no to. "What's up, Wills?" he asked, rubbing his tired eyes. "Can you sign this permission slip? It's for the overnight field trip to the museum next weekend." She held out a crumpled form, not quite meeting his gaze. Knox frowned. "Didn't you just have a field trip last month?" "That was for biology. This is for history," Willow replied, her voice carrying that distinctive teenage note of exasperation that suggested her father was hopelessly out of touch. "Let me talk to your mother about it first." Knox reached for the paper, but Willow pulled it back. "Mom already said yes. She said you'd be too busy to care anyway." The words had barbs in them. Knox felt that familiar sting, the accusation that had been growing more frequent over the past year. Between the Alpine Heights project and the municipal library reconstruction, he'd been working 70-hour weeks. It was temporary, he kept telling them, just until the projects were complete. His 13-year-old son, River, had stopped asking him to attend his soccer games months ago. "That's not fair, Willow. I care about everything you do." He stood, reaching for the form again. This time she let him take it. "Whatever. Just sign it. Theo's dad is chaperoning and already said I could be in his group." Knox's pen paused above the signature line. "Theo? Who's Theo?" Willow rolled her eyes. "Mom's friend Porter's son. You met them at the barbecue, remember? The one you left early because of a work emergency?" Knox vaguely recalled a tall man with a too-perfect smile and a firm handshake that lingered a beat too long when introduced to Bridget, his wife of 18 years. Porter Kendrick, former college football player turned real estate developer. New to the neighborhood, recently divorced, and apparently now hosting Knox's daughter on museum sleepovers. "Right," Knox said, scrawling his signature. "Porter." Later that night, Knox found Bridget in their bedroom, applying moisturizer to her neck with upward strokes, just as she'd done every night for the past 18 years. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and even without makeup, she was still the beauty who'd caught his eye at a friend's wedding nearly 2 decades ago. "You don't think it's strange that Porter Kendrick is chaperoning a high school field trip when his son just moved to the school?" Knox asked, loosening his tie. Bridget's movements paused for a microsecond before resuming. "He volunteers a lot. He's trying to get involved in the community." "Since when do you and Porter talk about his community involvement?" Bridget met his eyes in the mirror. "We run into each other at school events. The ones you're too busy for." The accusation hung in the air between them, another brick in the growing wall. "That Alpine Heights project is worth 7 figures, Bridge. It secures Willow and River's college funds. You know that." "What I know," Bridget said, screwing the cap back on her moisturizer with deliberate precision, "is that you've been saying just one more big project for the past 5 years. The kids are growing up without you, Knox. I'm doing this for them. For us. Are you? Or are you doing it for yourself?" Bridget slipped under the covers, turning away from his side of the bed. "Porter makes time for his son, and he runs a company with offices in 3 states. Knox felt something cold settle in his stomach at the comparison. Porter Kendrick's divorce was finalized 6 months ago. Maybe if he'd worked a little harder on his marriage instead of his community involvement, he wouldn't be starting over at 45. Bridget didn't respond, and her breathing soon evened into sleep. Knox stayed up working on the Alpine Heights revisions, the conversation replaying in his mind. Around 2 a.m., he noticed Bridget's phone light up with a text. Normally, he would have ignored it, but something, intuition or paranoia, made him glance at the screen. The message preview from PK simply read, "Miss you already. Sweet dreams." Knox stared at the message until the screen went dark again. Then he returned to his blueprints, his mind calculating a different kind of structural weakness, one in the foundation of his family. Chapter 2. The Load-Bearing Betrayal. Over the next 3 months, Knox became an unwilling detective in his own home. The clues were subtle at first. Bridget's new workout regimen, the expensive lingerie receipts for items he'd never seen, her phone perpetually face down or locked. Then came the late-night book club, meetings that never seemed to involve actual books, and weekend self-care retreats, from which she returned with no spa brochures but a distinctive glow. Knox said nothing. He watched. He documented. He built his case with the same methodical precision he applied to his architectural projects. Trust, but verify. That was his new mantra as he tracked the betrayal taking shape under his own roof. On a rainy Tuesday in April, Knox left work early, telling his assistant he had a migraine. Instead, he parked his Audi 3 blocks from the Aspen, an upscale downtown hotel where Bridget had mentioned having lunch with her friends. From his vantage point in the lobby bar, Knox had a clear view of the elevators, and of his wife emerging from one at 3:17 p.m., her hand intertwined with Porter Kendrick's. They didn't see Knox as they crossed the lobby, Bridget laughing at something Porter whispered in her ear before he kissed her in full view of the reception desk. That night at dinner, Bridget talked about her productive day of shopping, while River complained about his math teacher, and Willow texted under the table, presumably to Theo Kendrick, who had become a fixture in her stories lately. "You seem distracted, honey," Bridget said, placing her hand on Knox's. "Still stressed about the Alpine Heights revisions?" Knox looked at her hand on his, at the wedding ring he'd placed there 18 years ago. "Just tired. How was lunch with the girls?" "Great. Margot's going through a rough patch with Phil, so we mostly listened to her vent." Knox nodded, taking a sip of his water. "That's too bad. Marriage can be tricky when people aren't honest with each other." Bridget agreed, turning to ask River about an upcoming math test. Later that week, Knox installed surveillance cameras in the house. One in the foyer, one in the kitchen, and one covering the garage entrance. He told Bridget they were part of a new security system after a break-in 2 streets over. She didn't question it. The cameras captured Porter Kendrick entering their home on 3 separate occasions when Knox was supposedly at work and the kids at school. Each time, he and Bridget would disappear upstairs for approximately 90 minutes. On his most recent visit, Porter had brought his son Theo, who played video games in the basement entertainment room while his father and Bridget conducted their affair upstairs. Most disturbing to Knox was the footage from after one such rendezvous. Porter, Bridget, and Theo were in the kitchen when Willow came home early from soccer practice. There was an easy familiarity between them all, with Porter ruffling Willow's hair and asking about her day as if he belonged there. Willow hadn't seemed surprised to see him. Worse, she'd hugged him before grabbing a snack and heading upstairs with Theo. That night, Knox accessed Willow's laptop while she was showering. Her text messages with Theo revealed a relationship that had progressed far beyond friendship. More alarming were her exchanges with Porter. "Theo's dad. How's my favorite almost stepdaughter? Did you ace that history test?" "Willow. Pretty sure I got an A. Thanks for helping me study. Dad never has time." "Theo's dad. That's what family's for. Your mom says the overnight museum trip is a go. I'll make sure you and Theo have some space to hang out. Our secret." Knox felt physically ill as he read through dozens of similar exchanges. His daughter's loyalties had been deliberately cultivated by Porter, with Bridget's apparent blessing. Even worse were Willow's texts with her mother. "Willow, when are you going to tell Dad? This is getting weird." "Mom, soon, honey. There are financial things to figure out first. Porter's lawyer is helping us make sure everything's handled the right way." "Willow, River's going to freak out. He still thinks Dad hung the moon." "Mom, he'll adjust. Porter's great with him too. And their house is so much bigger. You'll each have your own bathroom." Knox's vision blurred with rage as the pieces fell into place. Not only were Bridget and Porter conducting an affair, but they were planning to blindside him with divorce papers after systematically turning his children against him and securing financial advantages through Porter's connections. His 13-year-old son, River, appeared to be the only family member not involved in the conspiracy. But for how long? How soon before Porter started taking him to ball games and buying his loyalty too? Knox closed the laptop carefully and returned it to Willow's desk. Then he walked to his home office, locked the door, and began to plan. If they wanted war, they would have it, but it would be fought on his terms, with blueprints of his design. Chapter 3. Structural Integrity. Knox Ballard had always believed that true strength came from precise planning. As an architect, He knew that even the most impressive facade would crumble without proper structural support. Now, facing the collapse of his family, he applied those same principles to his revenge. First, he needed information, the foundation of any sound structure. Knox hired Vern Dempsey, a retired detective with questionable ethics but impeccable investigative skills. Vern's findings were comprehensive. Porter Kendrick's real estate empire was largely a facade, propped up by leveraged properties and creative accounting. His divorce hadn't been amicable as he claimed. His ex-wife had caught him with their son's 22-year-old swimming instructor and taken him to the cleaners. More disturbing were Porter's conversations with his lawyer, Maxwell Shore, which Vern had somehow obtained recordings of. They detailed plans to have Bridget file for divorce on grounds of Knox's emotional abandonment, with affidavits from the children supporting claims that Knox was an absent father obsessed with work. "They're coaching the kids on what to say," Vern explained, sliding transcripts across Knox's desk. "Your daughter's all in, but they're working on the boy. Kendrick's been taking him to Avalanche games, buying him expensive sneakers. Classic grooming." "And my wife?" Knox asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Transferring assets. Small amounts to avoid triggering alerts. Setting up accounts you can't access. Classic pre-divorce maneuvers." Vern scratched his stubbled chin. "But here's where it gets interesting. She's been recording you." "Recording me?" "Phone conversations. Arguments. Times when you've canceled family events for work. Building a paper trail of neglect." Vern handed over one final report. "She's also got a therapist who's prepared to testify about her emotional distress from being married to a workaholic who prioritizes buildings over his family." Knox stared at the evidence of his wife's betrayal, methodically organized in color-coded folders. "What about Porter? What's his angle?" "From what I can tell, your wife's the prize, but your money's the bonus. His business is in trouble, overextended on several developments. Your wife doesn't know. He needs a cash infusion, and your architecture firm's value plus your personal assets would solve his problems neatly." Knox nodded, adding this piece to the mental blueprint of his counterattack. "What about his son, Theo?" Vern hesitated. "The kid's been in trouble. Nothing major. Weed, some vandalism, but his dad made it go away. He's got a fake ID, takes your daughter to college parties. There are some concerning photos." Knox's hand tightened on his pen until his knuckles went white. "Show me." The photos showed Willow at what was clearly a college party, drinking and sitting on Theo's lap. In one particularly disturbing image, she appeared unconscious or nearly so, with Theo still holding a drink to her lips. "This was last weekend? During the museum overnight?" Knox asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yeah, they never went to the museum. Kendrick covered for them, signed the attendance sheets. They went to some frat party at CSU instead." Knox filed this information away, another beam in the structure of his revenge. "I need one more thing, Vern. I need to know exactly where they're planning to live after the divorce." Vern raised an eyebrow. "That's specific. I'm an architect. Details matter." 2 days later, Vern confirmed what Knox had suspected. Porter had purchased a sprawling 8,000-square-foot home in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. The closing was scheduled for next month, and Bridget had already been there multiple times to discuss renovations with designers. "They're customizing bedrooms for your kids," Vern said, "planning to move them in right after the divorce is finalized." That night, Knox sat alone in his home office while Bridget attended another book club meeting. He pulled up the county property records for Porter's new mansion and studied the original architectural plans, noting load-bearing walls and support structures with a professional eye. Then he called a close friend at the state engineering board, the same friend who had helped him secure approval for several challenging projects in the past. After an hour-long conversation and promises of future considerations, Knox had what he needed: access to perform a safety consultation on Porter's new home before the final inspections. "Just making sure everything's up to code," Knox explained, considering recent structural failures in similar properties. As April turned to May, Knox continued gathering evidence and laying groundwork. He adjusted his work schedule to be home more often, started attending Rivers soccer games, and even volunteered to chaperone a school dance, much to Willow's evident discomfort and Bridget's suspicion. "What's with the sudden interest in family time?" Bridget asked one night after Knox had suggested a weekend trip to Rivers' favorite camping spot. Just realized I've been missing too much, Knox replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Time goes by so fast. Bridget studied him warily. Is everything okay at work? You're not in some kind of trouble, are you? Work's never been better, Knox said truthfully. The Alpine Heights project was nearly complete and would be his crowning achievement, a glass and steel marvel that seemed to hover above the Rocky Mountain skyline. Just reprioritizing. In early June, Knox received a text from Bridget. We need to talk tonight. After the kids are in bed. He knew what was coming. According to Vern's intelligence, the divorce papers were ready. The new house closing was scheduled for next week, and Bridget had already begun quietly packing personal items while Knox was at work. Sure, he replied. I have something I want to discuss too. That evening, Knox excused himself from dinner early, claiming he needed to prepare some documents for their talk. In reality, he was setting up the final pieces of his plan. By the time Bridget knocked on his office door at 9:30 p.m., the trap was baited and ready. Come in, Knox called, his voice calm and controlled. Bridget entered, wearing the determined expression of someone about to launch an unpleasant but necessary conversation. In her hand was a manila envelope that undoubtedly contained divorce papers. Before she could speak, Knox smiled sadly. You want a divorce? Bridget blinked, momentarily thrown off script. How did? I've known for months, Bridge. Knox gestured to the chair across from his desk. About Porter. About the plans for the kids. All of it. Bridget slowly sank into the chair, her face cycling through shock, guilt, and finally settling on defiance. Then you understand why this marriage isn't working. You checked out years ago, Knox. The kids need someone who's actually present in their lives. Someone like Porter? Knox asked mildly. The man who took our 16-year-old daughter to a college party and let her get drunk with his son instead of the museum overnight. Bridget's eyes widened. What are you talking about? They were at the Natural History Museum. Porter chaperoned their group. Did he? Knox opened a folder and slid a photo across the desk, Willow unconscious at the party while Theo poured more alcohol down her throat. This was taken the same night. Bridget stared at the photo, her hand going to her mouth. This can't be real. Porter would never. He would, and he did. Just like he lied to you about his financial situation. Just like he lied about his divorce. Just like he's been lying about his plans for our money. For the next 30 minutes, Knox methodically laid out everything Vern had uncovered. The financial problems, the previous affairs, the plans to use Bridget to access Knox's assets. With each revelation, Bridget's confident facade crumbled a little more. I don't believe you, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. You're making this up because you can't accept that I want to leave. Am I? Knox pulled out his phone and played a recording. Porter's voice clearly audible as he discussed with his lawyer how to bleed Ballard dry and use Bridget's share of the assets to shore up the Westlake development before the whole house of cards collapses. Tears streamed down Bridget's face now. Why are you showing me this? To hurt me? To punish me? To give you a choice? Knox leaned forward. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call your lawyer and tell him you've changed your mind about the divorce. You're going to end things with Porter. You're going to come clean to the kids about what you've done. Bridget laughed bitterly through her tears. Or what? You'll use these photos of Willow to humiliate her in court? What kind of father would do that? I'm not going to do anything to Willow. She's a victim in this, manipulated by you and Porter. Knox's voice hardened. But I will destroy Porter, financially, legally, and personally. I have enough evidence to ruin him, and I'll do it without hesitation unless you follow my instructions exactly. Bridget stared at him, seeing a side of her husband she'd never encountered before. You've changed. No, Knox corrected her. You just never knew me. Not really. He stood, signaling the end of the discussion. One more thing. I've taken the liberty of booking a hotel room for you tonight. I think we could both use some space. Bridget rose shakily. Knox, we should talk about this more. Maybe we can. We're done talking for now. You have until morning to decide. Knox handed her a hotel key card. Choose wisely, Bridget. For everyone's sake. After she left, Knox sat alone in his office, staring at the family photo on his desk, taken 3 years ago on a rare vacation, everyone smiling, the perfect family portrait. He opened his desk drawer and removed a hammer, then methodically smashed the frame, carefully extracting the photograph from the broken glass. This was just the beginning. Bridget had a choice to make, but regardless of her decision, Knox Ballard's revenge was a structure already under construction, with Porter Kendrick's destruction serving as its cornerstone. Chapter 4, Pressure Points. Bridget returned the next morning, red-eyed but resolute. "I've thought about everything you said," she began, standing stiffly in Knox's home office. "I'm not ending things with Porter. I don't believe half of what you showed me, and even if some of it is true, we can work through it together. He makes me happy, Knox. When was the last time you cared about that?" Knox nodded, unsurprised by her decision. "And the children? They deserve a chance at a real family. River will adjust, just like Willow has." Bridget's chin lifted defiantly. "I've already called my lawyer. We're proceeding with the divorce." "I see." Knox leaned back in his chair. "Then you should know I've also consulted an attorney. Given the circumstances of your affair, the evidence of parental alienation, and especially the endangerment of Willow, we'll be pursuing sole custody." Bridget laughed, though it sounded forced even to her own ears. "Good luck with that. No judge is going to award custody to a father who's been absent for years." "We'll see." Knox stood. "You can stay in the guest room until the hearing. I don't want to disrupt the children's routines more than necessary." The next 3 weeks unfolded in a cold war within the Ballard household. Bridget moved her things to the guest bedroom, telling the children that she and Knox were working through some issues. Willow became openly hostile toward her father, while River withdrew into confused silence, burying himself in soccer and video games. During this time, Knox put the second phase of his plan into motion. Using his professional credentials, he gained access to Porter Kendrick's new Cherry Hills mansion during the final stages of renovation. As the site supervisor gave him a tour of the property, Knox took careful notes, asking detailed questions about the foundation and support structures. "Everything looks good," Knox told the supervisor afterward. "Just one small concern about the main support beam in the basement. Mind if I take a closer measurement?" Once alone, Knox carefully placed 4 small devices at strategic locations throughout the house, one near the main electrical panel, one in the master bedroom wall, one in the basement ceiling, and one in the attic crawlspace. Each device, developed by a former client who specialized in military technology, was designed to create localized structural damage when activated remotely. Nothing catastrophic. Knox wasn't a murderer, but enough to make the house gradually appear dangerously unsound. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for June 25th. 3 days before, Knox invited River to his office after school, something he'd never done before. "This is where you work?" River asked, eyes wide as he took in the expansive design studio with its wall-to-wall windows overlooking downtown Denver. "This is it," Knox confirmed, watching his son explore the space with undisguised curiosity. "Want to see something cool?" Knox led River to a large table where a scale model of the Alpine Heights project dominated the center of the room. The boys circled it slowly, taking in every detail of the futuristic structure. "You designed this?" River asked, genuine awe in his voice. "Every inch," Knox confirmed. "Want to know a secret? Your initials are hidden in the design." He pointed to a section of the facade where the decorative elements subtly formed the letters RB. "No way." River leaned closer. "That's awesome." "Willow's initials are on the east side," Knox added. "And there's a star pattern on the roof that matches the constellation from the night your mother and I got engaged." River looked up at his father, confusion evident in his expression. "If you care about us so much, why are you never around?" Knox gestured for River to sit in one of the ergonomic chairs nearby. "That's a fair question. The truth is, I've made mistakes. I thought providing for our family meant working all the time, making sure you had everything you needed. I didn't realize what you really needed was me, present, involved. Mom says you care more about buildings than people." "Buildings are easy," Knox admitted. "People are complicated. I'm not great with complicated." River fidgeted with a drafting pencil from the table. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" "Willow says you are." Knox sighed. "It looks that way, buddy. But I want you to know something important. No matter what happens between me and your mom, you and Willow are still the most important people in my life. That will never change. Willow says we're going to live with Mom and Porter. That Porter's going to be our new dad." The pencil snapped in River's hand. "Is that what you want?" River shrugged, not meeting his father's eyes. "Porter's okay, I guess. He takes me to hockey games and stuff. But he's not you." River's voice was barely audible. "He keeps trying to get me to call him Pop. It's weird." Knox felt a surge of protective rage, but kept his expression neutral. You don't have to call him anything you're not comfortable with. And about living arrangements, that hasn't been decided yet. You're old enough that the judge will consider what you want. River looked up, surprise evident on his face. Really? Willow said it was already decided. Not even close, Knox assured him. In fact, why don't you come with me to court on Thursday? You can see for yourself how it works. Mom said kids aren't allowed. That's not true. You have every right to be there. Knox placed a hand on his son's shoulder. I think it's important for you to hear everything yourself, not just what people tell you afterward. River nodded slowly. Okay, I'll come. On the morning of the hearing, Bridget was livid to find River dressed and ready to accompany Knox to court. This is completely inappropriate, she hissed as they prepared to leave. You're manipulating him. I'm allowing him to witness something that will profoundly affect his life, Knox replied calmly. You and Porter have been manipulating both children for months. The difference is, I'm being transparent. At the courthouse, Knox was surprised to find not only Porter waiting with Bridget's attorney, but Willow as well. She glared at him before turning her attention to her phone, pointedly ignoring River's attempts to talk to her. Inside the courtroom, Judge Eleanor Marsh, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for protecting children's interests above all else, reviewed the preliminary filings with narrowed eyes. Before we proceed, she said, I see we have minors present. While I appreciate their interest in these proceedings, I'll need to determine if their presence is appropriate for all portions of today's hearing. Bridget's attorney, Maxwell Shore, immediately stood. Your Honor, the Ballard children are here at the request of their mother and with the support of Mr. Kendrick, who has been a positive influence in their lives. They're prepared to testify to their preference to remain with Mrs. Ballard. Judge Marsh frowned. Mr. Shore, children are not witnesses to be paraded before the court at this stage. Who advised you this would be appropriate? I believe that was my wife's idea, Your Honor, Knox interjected smoothly. Though I support River's right to observe these proceedings, I specifically advised against anyone coaching the children on testimony. Judge Marsh turned her attention to Bridget. Mrs. Ballard, is it true you prepared your children to testify today? Bridget glanced nervously at Shore before responding. We simply discussed what would happen, Your Honor. The children have expressed strong feelings about their living arrangements. I see. Judge Marsh shuffled some papers. Before we continue, I'd like to see counsel in my chambers. Mr. and Mrs. Ballard, please remain seated. Mr. Kendrick, as you are not a party to this case, you may wait outside. Porter looked as if he might object but thought better of it, shooting Knox a venomous look before exiting. In the momentary quiet that followed, Willow leaned toward her mother. Where did Porter go? I thought he was going to tell the judge about Dad. Not now, Willow, Bridget whispered. But Knox had heard every word. Tell the judge what about Dad? River asked, louder than necessary. Willow rolled her eyes. About how he's never around. How he doesn't care about us. That's not true. River protested. Dad cares. He put our initials in his building. Who cares about stupid initials in a building nobody can even see? Willow snapped. Porter's been more of a father in 6 months than Dad has in years. Knox remained silent, letting the siblings' exchange unfold naturally. Several people in the courtroom were now watching with interest, including the court reporter who continued transcribing despite the judge's absence. At least Dad doesn't take you to college parties and get you drunk. River shot back. Willow's face drained of color. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Do too. I saw the pictures on Dad's desk. You were passed out, and that jerk Theo was. Enough. Bridget interceded, grabbing River's arm. That's enough, both of you. The courtroom doors opened, and Judge Marsh returned, followed by the attorneys. She surveyed the tense family tableau before her with a practiced eye. In light of certain information that has come to my attention, she began, I'm appointing a guardian ad litem to represent the Ballard children's interests. Additionally, I'm ordering a full investigation into the welfare concerns raised in Mr. Ballard's petition. Maxwell Shore was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, these are baseless accusations designed to distract from Mr. Ballard's neglect of his family obligations. Mr. Shore, Judge Marsh's voice could have frozen fire. I've reviewed the evidence Mr. Ballard's counsel provided in chambers. The photographs alone warrant investigation. If you were aware of these allegations and failed to disclose them, we have a serious problem. Shore wilted visibly. Beside Bridget, Willow had begun to cry silently. Judge Marsh continued. Until the investigation is complete and the guardian ad litem submits their report, the children will remain in the family home. Mr. Ballard will retain temporary primary physical custody, with Mrs. Ballard granted supervised visitation. Supervised? Bridget gasped. On what grounds? On the grounds that you allegedly facilitated your minor daughter's attendance at an adult party where she was provided alcohol, Mrs. Ballard. The judge's voice was steel. And on the grounds that you allowed Mr. Kendrick inappropriate access to your children before any formal custody arrangement was established. As Bridget began to protest, the judge held up her hand. Additionally, there will be a temporary restraining order prohibiting Mr. Kendrick from contact with either Ballard child pending investigation of the incidents documented in these photographs. This is ridiculous. Bridget stood, her face flushed with anger. Knox is manipulating the court just like he's manipulated River. Willow, tell them. Tell them how Porter and Theo have been good for us. All eyes turned to Willow, who looked trapped between loyalty to her mother and the weight of the judge's stern gaze. Mr. Kendrick said I was mature for my age, she finally whispered. He said he understood me better than Dad ever could. An ugly murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Marsh's expression darkened further. Mrs. Ballard, I strongly advise you to stop encouraging your daughter to speak right now. She turned to Willow with gentler eyes. Young lady, you don't have to say anything else. The guardian ad litem will speak with you privately. As they left the courtroom, Knox maintained his composed facade, even as Bridget hurled accusations at him in the hallway. Porter Kendrick was nowhere to be seen, having apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor after the judge's ruling. Only when Knox was alone in his car did he allow himself a moment of grim satisfaction. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. Bridget and Porter had underestimated him, a mistake they would continue to regret. That night, alone in his office with the door locked, Knox activated the first of the devices hidden in Porter's Cherry Hills mansion. Miles away, hairline cracks began to form in the drywall of the master bedroom, small enough to be dismissed as settlement issues, but just the beginning of what would appear to be catastrophic structural problems. By the time Porter Kendrick realized his dream home was becoming a nightmare, it would be too late to connect the dots back to Knox Ballard, master architect, and even more masterful destroyer. Chapter 5. Calculated Collapse. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, Porter Kendrick's carefully constructed world began to show its first visible cracks, both literally and figuratively. The guardian ad litem, Moira Delgado, had conducted extensive interviews with Willow, River, Bridget, and Knox, as well as teachers, neighbors, and, reluctantly, Porter himself. Her preliminary report to the court was devastating for Bridget's case. Willow had eventually admitted, when questioned separately from her mother, that Porter and Theo had indeed taken her to several college parties. Text messages recovered from her phone confirmed that Porter had actively encouraged her relationship with Theo, even facilitating opportunities for them to be alone together. Most damning was Moira's assessment of the parental alienation campaign. There appears to have been a systematic effort to rewrite the family narrative, casting Mr. Ballard as neglectful and Mr. Kendrick as a rescuer figure. This manipulation has caused significant emotional harm, particularly to the minor daughter, who now expresses confusion about events and relationships that preceded Mr. Kendrick's involvement. Judge Marsh extended the temporary custody arrangement and expanded the restraining order to include electronic communications. Porter Kendrick was explicitly barred from any contact with Willow or River, and Bridget's supervised visitation was further restricted. Privately, Knox took no pleasure in Willow's distress. The psychological evaluation had revealed the extent to which she'd been manipulated, leaving her angry and confused. She refused to speak to Knox, blaming him for ruining everything, while simultaneously withdrawing from Bridget, whose promises had proven hollow. Only with River did Knox find any semblance of rebuilding. The boy, initially cautious, had begun to respond to his father's consistent presence. They established routines, soccer practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays, model building on weekend mornings, cooking experiments on Sunday nights. Small steps toward healing a relationship that had been systematically undermined. Meanwhile, Porter Kendrick was facing troubles of his own. The first evidence came via local news reports that the Westlake development, Porter's flagship project, had abruptly halted construction due to financing irregularities. 3 days later, building inspectors were called to Porter's Cherry Hills mansion after a neighbor reported seeing workers frantically examining the property's foundation. Knox monitored these developments with calculated interest, activating the second device in Porter's house after confirming through Vern that Porter had taken out a second mortgage on the property to shore up his failing business ventures. The resulting damage, a basement flooding issue caused by what appeared to be shifting foundation walls, would take weeks and tens of thousands of dollars to address. By early August, the divorce proceedings had become increasingly complex. Bridget, realizing her initial strategy had backfired spectacularly, hired new counsel and changed tactics, now claiming that Knox had orchestrated an elaborate frame-up of Porter to gain advantage in the divorce. My client acknowledges her extramarital relationship was inappropriate, Barbara Stillwell, Bridget's new attorney, told the court. However, the extreme measures Mr. Ballard has taken, hiring private investigators, installing surveillance in the family home without disclosure, manipulating evidence, speak to a disturbing pattern of control and retribution. Knox's attorney, Lydia Werner, countered with a methodical presentation of the timeline. Mr. Ballard installed security cameras in common areas of his own home after confirming his wife's infidelity. These cameras captured Mr. Kendrick's inappropriate interactions with the Ballard children, interactions Mrs. Ballard not only permitted but encouraged. Any responsible parent would have taken similar protective measures. Outside the courtroom battle, Knox continued his two-pronged approach, rebuilding his relationship with River while systematically dismantling Porter Kendrick's life. Through carefully placed comments to business associates, legitimate questions raised about Porter's development projects, and the strategic activation of the remaining devices in the Cherry Hills mansion, Knox created a perfect storm of personal and professional crises for his wife's lover. The Denver Business Journal ran a feature questioning the viability of Kendrick Development's projects, citing concerns from investors and contractors about payment delays. Building inspectors, acting on anonymous tips, discovered code violations at 3 of Porter's properties. And the Cherry Hills mansion, which had become a money pit of unexplainable structural issues, was now deemed potentially unsafe for occupancy. In mid-August, Knox received an unexpected call from Barbara Stillwell. Mr. Ballard, my client would like to discuss settlement terms. Off the record. The meeting took place at Stillwell's office, with only the attorneys and estranged spouses present. Bridget looked exhausted, the confident woman who had planned to leave Knox for a wealthier, more attentive man now replaced by someone harried and uncertain. I'll be direct, Stillwell began. Mrs. Ballard is prepared to withdraw her petition for primary custody and accept a much more modest financial settlement than initially proposed, in exchange for Mr. Ballard's agreement not to pursue further investigation into Mr. Kendrick's interactions with the Ballard children. Knox leaned back in his chair, his expression neutral. And why would I agree to that? Because despite everything, these are still your children, Bridget interjected, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. Willow's already been through hell with the interviews and evaluations. Do you really want her to testify in open court about this? Interesting that you're suddenly concerned about Willow's well-being, Knox observed coldly. Where was this concern when you were letting Porter groom her to accept him as her new father? When you were allowing his son to take her to college parties? I made mistakes. Bridget's composure cracked. Terrible mistakes. Is that what you want to hear? Porter isn't who I thought he was. He lied to me about everything. His business, his plans, even his relationship with Theo. Knox studied his wife's face, searching for any sign of manipulation. Finding none, he nodded for her to continue. Theo told Willow that I knew about the parties, that I gave them permission. Bridget's voice broke. I never did. I swear to you, Knox. I thought they were at school events. Porter convinced me you were the bad influence, that you were trying to control us all. I was stupid and selfish, and I believed him. Knox turned to his attorney. Give us the room, please. When they were alone, Knox leaned forward. What happened to the woman who told me I was never there for our family? Who laughed about taking me for everything in the divorce? Tears streamed down Bridget's face. She woke up. Porter's been using me to save his business. The house he bought, the one he said would be our fresh start, it's falling apart. The inspector said it might have been deliberately sabotaged. She looked up, eyes widening suddenly. Was that you? Knox's expression revealed nothing. You made your choice, Bridget. You chose him. I know, she whispered. And I'll regret it forever. But please, Knox, don't put Willow through a full trial. She's so confused, so angry. She needs stability, not more trauma. Knox considered his wife's plea. The judge had already ruled favorably on temporary custody. The financial disclosures had revealed Bridget's attempts to hide assets, severely weakening her position. And Porter Kendrick was rapidly becoming toxic in Denver's business and social circles, his reputation in tatters and his company on the verge of bankruptcy. In many ways, Knox had already won. But victory without Willow's recovery wasn't victory at all. I'll consider a settlement on one condition, Knox finally said. You tell Willow the truth. All of it. How you and Porter manipulated her against me. How you planned to take her away. How you prioritized your affair over her safety. She deserves to hear it from you. Bridget closed her eyes briefly. She'll hate me. Probably. Knox agreed without sympathy. But the truth is the only foundation strong enough to rebuild on. You taught me that, ironically enough. Later that week, Knox activated the final device in Porter's mansion while Bridget had her painful conversation with Willow. The resulting structural damage, a catastrophic shift in the main support beam that sent cracks racing through every wall of the house, was the coup de grace. Porter's dream home was officially condemned the next day, unsalvageable except at a cost far exceeding its value. By September, Porter Kendrick had filed for bankruptcy. His business collapsed under the weight of multiple failed projects, investor lawsuits, and the financial strain of the unsellable Cherry Hills property. His ex-wife filed for full custody of Theo after the details of his enabling behavior with Willow came to light. And Bridget, now living in a modest apartment and working as a receptionist at a dental office, had signed divorce papers giving Knox primary custody of both children and minimal alimony for just 2 years. The perfect family portrait Knox had once cherished was gone forever, replaced by something more complicated and painful. But unlike the structures he designed professionally, Knox knew that families couldn't be blueprint or controlled. They could only be built day by day, with honesty as their foundation, even when that honesty revealed uncomfortable truths. As summer turned to fall, Willow slowly began to speak to Knox again. Not with the easy affection of before, but with cautious respect that felt like the first brick in a new foundation. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Chapter 6, The Last Support Beam. By late October, 6 months after Knox had discovered Bridget's affair, the formal dissolution of their marriage was nearly complete. The settlement had been finalized, custody arrangements solidified, and the family home put on the market. Knox had purchased a smaller but architecturally significant house closer to his office, with rooms personally redesigned for both River and Willow. River had adjusted remarkably well, thriving under Knox's more consistent presence and the stability of their new routines. Willow remained more reserved, dividing her time between Knox's new home and Bridget's apartment as specified in the custody agreement. But the bitter hostility had faded to a wary truce. Porter Kendrick had fled Colorado entirely, his reputation and business in ruins. Rumors placed him in Arizona, attempting to rebuild with diminished resources and a tarnished name. His son Theo had been sent to a military academy after his mother won full custody, cutting off the unhealthy influence Porter had cultivated in the boy. For all practical purposes, Knox's revenge was complete. Bridget humbled, Porter destroyed, his children returning to his orbit. Yet a hollow dissatisfaction lingered. The family court proceedings had been clinical and controlled, nothing like the dramatic confrontation he had sometimes imagined in his darkest moments of rage. There had been no public reckoning, no moment when Bridget and Porter fully acknowledged the depth of their betrayal. That changed on a crisp November morning, when Knox received an unexpected call from Judge Eleanor Marsh's clerk. Mr. Ballard, the judge requires your presence for an emergency hearing in the matter of Ballard versus Ballard. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Mrs. Ballard has already been notified. May I ask what this concerns? Knox inquired, a sliver of apprehension piercing his calculated composure. The settlement has been approved. The judge didn't specify, sir. Just that your presence is mandatory. Knox spent a restless night wondering what could have prompted this sudden summons. Had Bridget uncovered evidence of his sabotage of Porter's mansion? Had someone connected him to the anonymous tips that had triggered investigations into Porter's business practices? A single misstep could unravel everything he'd accomplished. The following morning, Knox arrived at the courthouse to find Bridget already seated in Judge Marsh's courtroom, looking as anxious as he felt. To his surprise, Willow was also present, sitting in the gallery with Moira Delgado, the guardian ad litem. River was presumably at school. "Do you know what this is about?" Knox asked Bridget quietly as he took his seat. She shook her head, eyes troubled. Barbara just said it was urgent. Something about new evidence. Before Knox could respond, the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Marsh entered, her expression grave. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she began without preamble. "An unusual situation has arisen that requires immediate attention." She nodded to her clerk, who distributed folders to Knox, Bridget, and their attorneys. "These documents were delivered to my chambers yesterday by a young woman named Amber Whitley. She claims to have been in a relationship with Porter Kendrick from June of last year until February of this year, while he was also involved with Mrs. Ballard." Knox opened the folder to find photographs, text messages, and a sworn affidavit. The images showed Porter with a young woman who couldn't have been more than 20. The texts between them were explicit and concerning, particularly those where Porter discussed his plans regarding Bridget and the Ballard children. Porter: "Once I lock down Bridget, her ex will be on the hook for major cash. Guy's loaded and has no clue what's coming." Amber: "What about the kids? The girls still giving you trouble?" Porter: "Willow's coming around. Theo's helping with that. The boy's tougher, but kids are easy. Just buy them shit and they fall in line." Amber: "And Bridget really doesn't know about us? Or the others?" Porter: "She sees what she wants to see. Desperate housewife syndrome. Thinks I'm her knight in shining armor after years with a workaholic. Standard playbook." Knox looked up from the text to find Bridget staring at the same messages, her face ashen. Across the courtroom, Willow was huddled against Moira's side, silent tears streaming down her face. Ms. Whitley came forward after learning about the custody proceedings through mutual acquaintances. Judge Marsh continued. "She claims Mr. Kendrick had similar relationships with at least 3 other women during the time he was involved with Mrs. Ballard, and that he specifically targeted Mrs. Ballard for her connection to Mr. Ballard's assets. There's more," the judge added, her voice softening slightly. Ms. Whitley also provided evidence that Mr. Kendrick and his son Theodore engaged in what can only be described as a pattern of predatory behavior toward young women, including Willow Ballard. Knox's blood ran cold as he turned to the next page in the folder. There were screenshots of text conversations between Porter and Theo, discussing Willow in terms that made his hands shake with rage. Theo: "Dad, Willow's getting weird about the parties. Says she wants to tell her mom." Porter: "Handle it. That's what the charm's for. Tell her how special she is, how mature. The usual." Theo: "Already did. Also got some pics that'll make her think twice about talking." Porter: "That's my boy. Just keep her happy until I close the deal with her mom. After that, doesn't matter what she says. I'll be stepdad with the checkbook." Judge Marsh allowed a moment for them to absorb the evidence before continuing. "In light of these revelations, I've contacted the district attorney's office. Mr. Kendrick is currently being investigated for multiple potential offenses, including contributing to the delinquency of minors." She turned to Bridget. "Mrs. Ballard, while I recognize you were also a victim of Mr. Kendrick's manipulation to some degree, your failure to protect your daughter and your active participation in alienating the children from their father remains deeply troubling." Bridget nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand, Your Honor." "Mr. Ballard," the judge continued, "while your actions throughout this process have generally prioritized your children's welfare, I'm concerned by the surveillance measures you implemented without court approval." Knox met her gaze steadily. "I did what was necessary to protect my children when conventional channels seemed insufficient." Judge Marsh studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Given these new developments, I'm modifying the custody arrangement. Mr. Ballard will retain primary physical custody of both children. Mrs. Ballard's visitation will remain supervised for an additional 6 months, with mandatory family counseling for all parties." She turned toward Willow in the gallery. "Young lady, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. The adults in your life failed you in various ways, but you bear no responsibility for their actions." Willow nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes fixed on the floor. After the hearing concluded, Knox approached his daughter carefully. Willow, would you like me to take you home? Or you can go with your mother if you prefer. Willow looked between her parents, indecision clear in her tear-stained face. I just want to go somewhere quiet. I don't want to talk about any of this. We don't have to talk, Knox assured her. We can just sit together. Or I can give you space if that's what you need. Bridget stepped forward hesitantly. Willow, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about any of this. I would never have. But you did. Willow interrupted, her voice stronger than it had been in months. You knew something was wrong and you ignored it because you wanted Porter more than you wanted to protect me. The brutal accuracy of the statement left Bridget speechless. Knox felt a surge of fierce pride in his daughter's clarity, even through his sorrow at what she'd endured. I want to go with Dad, Willow finally decided. Just not yet. Can I sit here for a minute first? Of course, Knox said. Take all the time you need. As he stepped back to give her space, Knox caught sight of a familiar figure entering the courtroom. Porter Kendrick, flanked by a nervous-looking attorney. Their eyes met across the room, Porter's widening in recognition and then narrowing with hatred. You did this, Porter said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You orchestrated this whole thing. Knox remained impassive. The only thing I orchestrated was protecting my family from you. Everything else was your own doing. Porter lunged forward suddenly, only to be restrained by his attorney and a court officer. You think you've won? You think this is over? I've still got your wife, your daughter. My teenage daughter screamed at me in court. You were never there for us. Mom's boyfriend is our real dad now. Knox's voice cut through Porter's tirade, reciting Willow's words from months earlier. My wife laughed as the judge awarded her everything. The courtroom fell silent as Knox stepped closer to Porter, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet that nonetheless carried to every corner of the room. I silently placed one photo on the table. My daughter froze. That's from the night you said you were. Knox nodded toward the evidence folders. And now the courtroom has fallen silent as the police prepare to arrest not just my wife, but you, Porter, for what you did to my daughter, for what you planned to do to my family. Porter's face drained of color as he realized the extent of what was happening. At that moment, two plainclothes detectives entered the courtroom, moving purposefully toward him. Porter Kendrick, one of them said, we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding your relationship with several minors, including Willow Ballard. As Porter was led away, protesting his innocence, Knox turned back to find Willow standing beside him, her expression unreadable. Did you plan all of this? She asked quietly. From the beginning? Knox considered his answer carefully. I plan to protect you and River by any means necessary. That's what parents are supposed to do. Willow studied his face for a long moment. You're not what Mom said you were. No, Knox agreed. I'm not. And she's not who I thought she was either. Willow glanced at Bridget, who stood frozen in shock at the unexpected turn of events. People are complicated, Wills. Buildings are easy. They stand or fall based on how they're designed. People can surprise you. Willow nodded slightly. Can we go home now? The real home, with you and River? Absolutely, Knox said, offering his hand. To his surprise, Willow took it, the first voluntary physical contact she'd initiated in months. As they walked out of the courtroom together, Knox felt the weight of the past 6 months, the rage, the plotting, the cold calculation, begin to lift. The perfect family he'd once pictured was gone forever, but in its place, something stronger might yet be built. Not a showcase home with flawless curb appeal, but a structure designed to weather storms, with a foundation reinforced by hard truths and hard-won wisdom. Porter Kendrick's carefully constructed life had collapsed completely, just as Knox had planned. But Knox's own blueprint had changed along the way, with different priorities and different measures of success. The revenge he'd executed so methodically had served its purpose, but now it was time to design something new, a future where his children could heal and thrive, with or without Bridget's involvement. As they stepped out into the November sunlight, Willow looked up at him. Dad? How did you know? About Porter and Theo, I mean. Before anyone else did. Knox squeezed her hand gently. Because unlike them, I was paying attention to what really mattered. And I always will. Chapter 7. New Foundations. 1 year after the courtroom confrontation, Knox Ballard stood at the window of his office, watching snow blanket the Denver skyline. The Alpine Heights project had been completed to widespread acclaim, earning him several prestigious awards and a feature in Architectural Digest. Professionally, he had never been more successful. Personally, the reconstruction was ongoing, with both progress and setbacks. A knock at his office door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, turning from the window. Willow entered, snowflakes still melting in her hair. At 17, she carried herself with a guarded maturity born from difficult experience. Therapy had helped, but some wounds would take years to fully heal. "You wanted to see me before dinner?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I did." Knox handed her an envelope. "This came for you today." Willow opened it cautiously, then broke into a genuine smile, a still rare occurrence. "I got an early decision to Columbia." "Congratulations." Knox's pride was tempered with concern. "It's a long way from home." "That's kind of the point, Dad." Willow set the acceptance letter on the desk. "I need space to figure out who I am without all of this hanging over me." Knox nodded, understanding. In the years since Porter Kendrick's arrest and subsequent conviction for contributing to the delinquency of minors, Willow had worked hard to rebuild her confidence and identity. The therapy sessions, both individual and family, had revealed the extent of Porter and Theo's manipulation, the careful grooming, the subtle threats, the calculated alienation from Knox. "New York is a fresh start," he acknowledged. "Just remember you always have a home here." Willow's expression softened slightly. "I know. And I'm not running away, I promise. I just need to build something that's mine." "I understand that better than most people," Knox said with a small smile. "Speaking of building things, did you see the final designs for the community center project?" The River's Edge Community Center was Knox's latest project, a multi-purpose facility in an underserved Denver neighborhood, funded partially by his firm and partially by a foundation he'd established. It had become something of a family project, with both Willow and River contributing ideas to the design. "I love what you did with the teen space," Willow said, visibly relaxing as they shifted to safer conversational ground. "The privacy pods were a great addition. That was your suggestion, if you recall. Somewhere to be alone but not isolated, I believe you said." Willow smiled faintly at the memory. "I had some experience with that feeling." They discussed the project for another 20 minutes before heading home for the family dinner that had become a weekly tradition. River, now 14 and in the midst of a growth spurt that had him towering over his sister, was already setting the table when they arrived. Willow got her Columbia acceptance, Knox announced as they entered. River's reaction was characteristic, immediate enthusiasm tempered by the fear of abandonment that still occasionally surfaced. "That's awesome, but it's really far away. It's just college, dork. I'll be back for breaks." Willow ruffled his hair affectionately. "Besides, someone has to stay and make sure Dad doesn't work himself to death while I'm gone." "About that," Knox said as they took their seats at the table. "I've been meaning to talk to you both about some changes I'm considering." The siblings exchanged glances, immediately alert. Changes in their family had rarely been positive experiences. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations at the firm," Knox continued, "promoting Elise to managing partner and taking on an advisory role instead." "But you love your work," Willow objected, confusion evident in her expression. "I do, but I love you both more." Knox served himself some of the lasagna River had helped prepare. "The last year has taught me what really matters. I don't want to miss any more of your lives than I already have." The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they ate, but Knox noticed Willow watching him thoughtfully throughout the meal. After River left to video chat with friends, she lingered at the table. "Is this about Mom's letter?" she asked directly. Knox sighed. Bridget had recently written to both children, informing them she was moving to California with a new partner. Her supervised visitation had evolved into occasional dinners and phone calls, but the relationship remained strained, particularly with Willow. "Partially," he admitted. "I know her leaving again is difficult, even though things haven't been the same. I'm not upset about her going," Willow said with a shrug that didn't quite achieve the nonchalance she was aiming for. "She checked out of our lives long before Porter came along. I just didn't see it then. She's still your mother, Wills." Biologically, Willow traced patterns in the condensation on her water glass. "But you're the one who fought for us, who saw what was happening when no one else did, even when I hated you for it." Knox reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "I never took it personally." "Liar," Willow said, but with a hint of a smile. "You took everything personally." That's why you destroyed Porter so completely. The observation was startlingly accurate. In the aftermath of Porter's arrest, more victims had come forward, revealing a pattern of predatory behavior spanning years. His business assets had been liquidated to pay legal settlements. His reputation was irreparably destroyed, and he was now serving a 3-year sentence for his crimes. I did what was necessary, Knox said simply. The mansion, Willow said suddenly. The structural problems that bankrupted him. That was you, wasn't it? Knox maintained a neutral expression. I'm an architect, not a saboteur. Right. Willow's tone made it clear she didn't believe him for a second. Just like you just happened to know exactly when and where to find evidence of everything Porter and Theo were doing. Sometimes justice finds its own path. Willow studied him for a long moment. You know what's scary? I'm not even mad about it. Whatever you did to him, he deserved worse. The cold certainty in her voice troubled Knox. Revenge isn't something to aspire to, Willow. It doesn't heal anything. Then why did you do it? Because protecting you and River was worth any cost. Knox chose his next words carefully. But there's a difference between protection and vengeance. One looks forward, the other stays trapped in the past. Willow considered this. Is that why you're stepping back from work? Looking forward. Exactly. The past is a foundation, not a home. We build on it, but we don't live there. Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed, Knox sat alone in his study, reviewing the final blueprints for the community center. The building would be his legacy in many ways. Not the most architecturally daring or commercially successful of his designs, but perhaps the most meaningful. A text message interrupted his thoughts. Call me. It's important. Vern. Knox dialed the former detective's number immediately. Kendrick made bail on the new charges, Vern said without preamble when he answered. His lawyer argued flight risk was minimal since he has no resources left. Knox felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. Where is he now? That's the concerning part. He cleaned out his court-mandated housing and disappeared. His parole officer lost track of him yesterday. You think he's coming here? It wasn't a question. He blamed you for everything, Knox. Lost his mind during the sentencing hearing, had to be physically restrained. Called you the architect of his destruction. He's not wrong, Knox said quietly. Maybe not, but a man with nothing left to lose is dangerous. I've alerted my contacts at DPD, but officially, he hasn't done anything yet. They can't assign protection based on a hunch. I don't need protection, Knox assured him. But I appreciate the warning. After hanging up, Knox sat motionless for several minutes, weighing options and running scenarios in his mind. Then he went to the gun safe hidden behind a panel in his bookshelf, entering the combination with practiced ease. The Sig Sauer P365 inside was legally registered and maintained, though he'd never had occasion to use it. Until now, perhaps. Knox checked that the weapon was loaded, then placed it in the desk drawer within easy reach. Porter Kendrick had once underestimated him, mistaking his methodical nature for weakness. If Porter was foolish enough to come seeking revenge of his own, he would learn that lesson a final time. The reconstruction of Knox Ballard's life had come too far to be threatened by ghosts from the past. Some men built legacies with steel and glass, others with flesh and blood. Knox had mastered both materials, and he would defend his creation with the same precision and ruthlessness that had defined its design. Chapter 8. Structural Testing. 3 days after Vern's warning, Knox found himself studying every face he passed on the street, every car that lingered too long near his house, every shadow that didn't quite match its surroundings. He'd installed additional security measures, cameras covering every approach to the house, motion sensors in the yard, reinforced locks on all doors and windows. He told the children nothing, not wanting to disturb the fragile peace they'd established. River continued his soccer practices and gaming marathons with friends. Willow focused on finalizing her Columbia preparations while volunteering at the community center construction site. Their routines remained unchanged while Knox maintained his vigilance. On Thursday evening, Knox received a text from a number he didn't recognize. You took everything from me. Now we're even. The message was followed by an image that made Knox's blood freeze. A photograph of River on the soccer field, clearly taken that very afternoon during practice. The image was zoomed in, focused, deliberate. Knox immediately called River's phone. The boy answered on the third ring, his voice cheerful and distracted by background noise. Hey, Dad. I'm at Jason's house. We're doing that history project together. Are you okay? Is anyone unusual around? Knox asked, already grabbing his keys and the Sig Sauer from his desk drawer. What? No, we're just working on our presentation. Jason's mom made nachos. What? No reason. Knox forced his voice to sound casual. Just checking in. When will you be home? Around 9? Jason's dad said he'd drop me off. Text me when you're on your way, Knox instructed. And River? Stay inside until then. As soon as he hung up, Knox called Willow, his anxiety mounting with each ring. She finally answered, sounding annoyed. Dad, I'm in the middle of SAT prep with my study group at the library. What's up? Are you alone or with people? Knox asked, already heading to his car. With people, obviously. It's a study group. Her voice lowered with concern. What's going on? You sound weird. I need you to stay exactly where you are. I'm coming to pick you up. What? Dad, that's ridiculous. I have my car, and we're not done until 8. Willow, listen to me. Knox used the tone that brooked no argument. Stay in a public area with your friends. I'll be there in 15 minutes to explain. He hung up before she could protest further and called Vern as he pulled out of the driveway. Kendrick's here, Knox said when Vern answered. He sent me a picture of River at soccer practice. I need you to meet me at the downtown library. Willow's there, and I want backup when I get her. On my way, Vern replied without hesitation. I'll call in some favors at DPD too. By the time Knox reached the library, Vern was already there, his stocky frame and perpetual scowl intimidating enough that no one questioned his presence near the entrance. Together, they found Willow and her study group in a glass-enclosed meeting room on the second floor. Dad? What the hell? Willow demanded when she saw Knox. Her eyes widened at the sight of Vern. What's going on? We need to go? Now. Knox kept his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. I'll explain in the car. To his relief, Willow didn't argue further, gathering her books quickly after saying goodbye to her confused friends. As they walked to the parking garage, Knox and Vern positioned themselves on either side of her, scanning constantly for any sign of Porter. You're freaking me out, Willow said as they reached Knox's car. Is this about Mom? Did something happen? It's Porter, Knox said once they were inside with the doors locked. He's out on bail and in Denver. He sent me a picture of River at practice today. Willow's face drained of color. Oh my God. Is River okay? He's fine. He's at a friend's house, and I've alerted the parents. Vern's going to follow us home and make sure everything's secure. I can't believe this is happening again, Willow whispered. I thought it was over. I thought he was gone. Knox reached over to squeeze her hand. It will be over. Soon. I promise. When they arrived home, 2 police cruisers were already parked outside, Vern's contacts coming through. The officers had done a perimeter check and found nothing suspicious, but agreed to maintain a presence overnight given the circumstances. River was safely retrieved from his friend's house, confused and irritated by the sudden security measures until Knox showed him the threatening text. That's messed up, River said, his adolescent bravado faltering. What's he going to do? Nothing, Knox assured him firmly. Because we're going to be smarter and more careful than he is. That night, after both kids were asleep in rooms with newly enhanced security, Knox and Vern sat in the kitchen, planning their next moves. The police will keep an eye on things for a few days, but without direct threats or an actual appearance, they can't maintain surveillance indefinitely, Vern explained. We need to draw him out or find him. He wants me to suffer like he did, Knox said, thinking aloud. Losing everything, piece by piece. That's why he's targeting the kids first. They're what matters most to me. So we use that, Vern suggested. Create a situation where he thinks he can get to them, but it's actually a trap. Knox shook his head immediately. I'm not using my children as bait. Not actually using them, Vern clarified. Creating the appearance of vulnerability while keeping them completely safe. A construction site has multiple layers of security, but looks open to outsiders. Same principle. The mention of construction triggered something in Knox's mind. The community center. The opening ceremony is next week. It's been in all the local papers, and both kids are supposed to be there. Perfect, Vern nodded. Public event, predictable movements, but we can control the environment. If Kendrick's watching, he'll see it as an opportunity. They spent the next hour outlining a security plan for the River's Edge Community Center inauguration. Knox would keep the children home, but arrange for lookalikes to arrive in their place. creating the illusion that the entire Ballard family was attending as planned. The following week passed in a state of high alert. Additional security cameras revealed no signs of surveillance around the house, but Knox maintained strict protocols. The children were never alone, always accompanied by either Knox or trusted adults who had been briefed on the situation. On the morning of the community center ceremony, Knox gathered River and Willow in the living room. "You're both staying home today," he announced, with a security team outside and Vern inside. "What? No way." River protested immediately. "You promised I could cut the ribbon with you." "This is ridiculous," Willow added. "We can't just hide forever because some psycho might be out there." Knox held up his hand to silence their objections. "This isn't a discussion. Porter Kendrick is dangerous and unpredictable. The ceremony is the perfect opportunity for him. Public, announced in advance, easy to blend into the crowd." "So you're going alone?" Willow asked, suddenly concerned. "If he's so dangerous, why are you still going?" "Because that's exactly what he expects," Knox explained. "Me, alone and vulnerable after he's threatened what I care about most." Understanding dawned in Willow's eyes. "You're using yourself as bait." Knox nodded. "With plenty of backup. Police officers, private security, Vern's contacts, all watching and waiting. If Porter shows up, he'll be apprehended immediately. And if he doesn't?" River asked quietly. "Then we maintain precautions until he's found." Knox looked at each of his children in turn. "I know this is difficult and unfair, but I promise you, Porter Kendrick will not disrupt our lives again. One way or another, this ends today." The ceremony proceeded as planned, with Knox giving a speech about community resilience and second chances, an irony not lost on him as he scanned the assembled crowd for Porter's face. Decoys playing the roles of Willow and River stood off stage, visible enough to be convincing but protected by plainclothes security. As Knox cut the ceremonial ribbon and applause filled the air, he felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the architect's instinct for structural weakness that had served him so well professionally. His eyes swept the crowd again, more carefully this time, and locked on a figure standing near the back, partially obscured by a construction trailer. Porter Kendrick looked nothing like the polished, confident man who had once charmed his way into the Ballard family. His face was gaunt, his expensive clothes replaced by wrinkled khakis and a nondescript jacket. But his eyes held the same intensity as they fixed on Knox from across the distance. Without breaking eye contact, Knox tapped his earpiece twice, the signal they had arranged. "Target sighted, northwest corner, blue jacket." He murmured, continuing to smile and shake hands with city officials. "Copy that." Vern's voice came through the earpiece. "Units moving into position. Keep him focused on you." Knox excused himself from the dignitaries and began walking casually toward a quieter area of the construction site, away from the main crowd. As expected, Porter followed, maintaining distance but clearly tracking Knox's movements. When Knox reached a partially constructed section cordoned off from the public, he ducked under the caution tape and continued walking, leading Porter toward the trap they had prepared. The area was designed to look isolated but was covered by multiple cameras and surrounded by hidden security personnel. "Knox!" Porter's voice rang out suddenly. "Stop playing games." Knox turned slowly to face the man who had nearly destroyed his family. "Porter, you're looking diminished." Porter's laugh was hollow. "Funny coming from you. The great architect. The family man." He stepped closer, and Knox could see he was holding something in his right hand, a construction tool of some kind, heavy and metallic. "Where are the kids?" "Your precious Willow and River? I saw them earlier." "Safe," Knox replied simply. "Far from here." "Doesn't matter," Porter said, his eyes feverish with hatred. "I'll find them eventually, just like I found you. I've got nothing but time now, thanks to you." "This won't end the way you think, Porter." Knox remained perfectly still, aware of the security team closing in. "There's still a way out that doesn't end with you back in prison. Or worse." Porter's grip tightened on the metal tool. "Always so reasonable, so measured. That's what Bridget hated most about you, you know. Your cold, calculating control. She thought you were incapable of real feeling until you destroyed me." "Bridget was wrong about many things," Knox said evenly, "including you. She wasn't wrong about how easy it was to turn your daughter against you." Porter taunted, edging closer. Willow was so eager for attention, so desperate for someone to listen to her. "All I had to do was pretend to care, and she fell right into line. Knox felt a surge of rage, but maintained his composure. Is that what you told yourself? That you were giving her something she needed? Not that you were grooming a child to fulfill your sick need for control. We had a connection, Porter insisted, his delusion evident in his unwavering belief. She understood me. They all did. Willow, Theo, the others. They wanted what I offered. They were children, Knox said, disgust evident in his voice despite his efforts at restraint. Children you manipulated and exploited. Just like you tried to exploit Bridget. Just like you're trying to threaten my son now. Porter's face contorted with rage. You took everything from me. He lunged forward suddenly, swinging the metal tool toward Knox's head. Knox had anticipated the move, pivoting to avoid the blow while simultaneously reaching for the weapon concealed under his jacket. But before he could draw it, a blur of motion intercepted Porter, one of Vern's security team tackling him to the ground. More officers converged instantly, subduing Porter as he thrashed and screamed obscenities. Knox stood watching, a curious emptiness replacing the vigilant tension he'd carried for days. You okay? Vern appeared at his side, surveying the scene with professional satisfaction. Fine, Knox replied automatically, though the word felt inadequate. He wasn't injured, but okay seemed to stretch as he watched Porter being handcuffed and read his rights. He's done, Vern said with certainty. Violation of bail conditions, attempted assault, stalking, threatening a minor. He'll be locked up for years this time. No chance of early release. Knox nodded, still watching as Porter was led toward a waiting police car. As they passed, Porter locked eyes with Knox one final time. This isn't over, he spat. Not ever. It is for you, Knox replied calmly. You gambled everything on revenge, Porter. And just like last time, you lost. Later that evening, the Ballard family gathered in their living room, the tension of the past weeks finally beginning to dissipate. River was animatedly recounting how cool it had been to watch the arrest footage from the security cameras, while Willow remained quieter, processing the day's events. So it's really over now? She finally asked during a lull in River's narrative. He can't hurt us anymore? He can't, Knox confirmed. The DA is pushing for maximum sentencing given the violation of his parole and the new charges. He won't see freedom for a very long time. Willow nodded, visibly relieved, yet still troubled. I keep thinking about what you said before, about revenge not healing anything. Was today revenge or protection? Knox considered the question carefully. Both, maybe. I wanted him caught and punished, but more importantly, I needed to end the threat he posed to you and River. Sometimes the line between vengeance and justice gets blurry, like with what you did to his house. River interjected, grinning at Knox's startled expression. Come on, Dad. We figured that out ages ago. Willow said you probably used some architect voodoo to make it fall apart. Knox maintained a carefully neutral expression. I have no idea what you're talking about. Sure you don't, Willow said, rolling her eyes but with a hint of admiration in her voice. Just like you had no idea how all those building inspectors suddenly got anonymous tips about Porter's properties. The universe works in mysterious ways, Knox replied dryly. The universe, huh? Willow laughed, a genuine, unburdened sound that Knox hadn't heard in far too long. Well, remind me never to get on the universe's bad side. As the conversation drifted to more mundane topics, school projects, weekend plans, the upcoming holiday season, Knox found himself studying his children with a renewed appreciation. They had been tested in ways no family should endure, forced to confront adult complexities before they were ready. Yet here they were, resilient and intact, if changed by the experience. The family portrait he had once treasured was indeed gone forever, replaced by something less perfect, but ultimately stronger. A structure built not on appearances and expectations, but on truth and hard-won wisdom. Like all his best designs, it had survived the most rigorous structural testing and emerged standing. Porter Kendrick had failed in his attempt at revenge, but he had succeeded in one unintended way. He had forced Knox to become a more present, more engaged father. The bitter irony was that in trying to destroy Knox's family, Porter had inadvertently helped forge a stronger one. The reconstruction was far from complete, but the foundation was solid. And for an architect like Knox Ballard, that was always the most important part. Chapter 9, Final Inspection. 5 years later, Knox Ballard stood in the grand foyer of his newly completed masterpiece, The Ascendant, a revolutionary sustainable skyscraper that had redefined Denver's skyline and established him internationally as an architectural visionary. The building's official opening gala swirled around him, a sea of elegant gowns and tailored suits, champagne flutes, and air kisses. At 52, Knox had achieved every professional goal he had ever set. His firm, now the most prestigious in the Rocky Mountain region, had offices in 3 cities. His designs won awards with such regularity that his assistant had begun declining invitations to minor ceremonies to preserve his calendar. The Architectural Review had recently called him the most influential residential and commercial architect of his generation. None of this mattered as much as the sight that now caught his eye across the crowded room. His son River, 23 and impossibly handsome in his first custom suit, deep in conversation with the mayor of Denver. The boy who had once been uncertain of his place in the family had grown into a confident young man, completing his master's in urban planning while interning at Knox's firm. "He's going to outshine you soon," came a familiar voice at Knox's elbow. He turned to find Willow, radiant in an emerald gown that highlighted her poised elegance. At 28, she had graduated from Columbia with honors, completed law school, and recently joined the district attorney's office, specializing in cases involving exploitation and family justice. "That was always the plan," Knox replied with undisguised pride. "The student surpasses the master." "Sentimental in your old age?" Willow teased, linking her arm through his. "Next you'll be showing people wallet photos and boring them with stories about your brilliant children." "I've earned the right to be insufferable," Knox said with a smile. "How's the Porter Kendrick parole hearing preparation going?" Willow's expression hardened slightly. "Thoroughly. The victim impact statements are powerful, including mine. There's no way he's getting out early." Porter Kendrick's eventual sentencing had been comprehensive, 15 years for multiple offenses including parole violation, stalking, attempted assault, and a host of additional charges that surfaced during the investigation. Despite good behavior claims, his first parole hearing was approaching, and Willow had personally taken on the responsibility of ensuring the board understood the full scope of his crimes. "I never wanted this life for you," Knox said quietly, confronting people like Porter professionally. "You didn't choose it for me," Willow reminded him. "My experiences did. And I'm good at it, Dad. Really good. I understand how predators think because I've seen it up close." Knox nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. The traumas of the past had shaped his children, but not broken them. Where many might have emerged bitter or damaged beyond repair, River and Willow had channeled their experiences into purpose. River creating spaces where communities could thrive, Willow ensuring justice for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "Have you seen your mother tonight?" Knox asked, changing the subject. "I thought I saw her earlier with Howard. They're by the east windows. Mom wanted to congratulate you, but wasn't sure if it would be awkward." Knox scanned the crowd until he spotted Bridget, still beautiful at 50, standing beside her husband of 3 years. Howard Chun was a soft-spoken oncologist who treated Bridget with a gentle respect that had gradually earned Knox's cautious approval. Their relationship with the children remained complex, but had evolved into something functional, if not entirely healed. "I should say hello," Knox decided. "It's been months since we've talked." Willow squeezed his arm before releasing it. "Very mature of you. I'm going to rescue River from the mayor's monologue about zoning regulations before he loses the will to live." As Knox made his way through the crowd toward Bridget and Howard, he reflected on the long, complicated journey that had brought them all to this moment. After Porter's final arrest, Bridget had moved to California as planned, but returned to Denver 2 years later, alone and humbled by the experience. She had re-established cautious relationships with both children, accepting their wariness and working to earn back trust in small increments. "Knox," Bridget greeted him with a genuine smile when he reached them. "The building is absolutely magnificent. You've outdone yourself." "Thank you," Knox replied, shaking Howard's hand. "I appreciate you both coming tonight." "We wouldn't have missed it," Howard said warmly. "River's been talking about nothing else for weeks." The conversation flowed with surprising ease. Discussions of River's graduation plans, Willow's recent courtroom victory, Howard's research, the general catching up of people connected by history but living separate lives. There was no animosity, no rehashing of old wounds, just the civility of those who had survived a shared catastrophe and moved forward. As the evening progressed, Knox found himself on the observation deck of the Ascendant, momentarily alone amid the city lights. The spectacular view had been meticulously planned from his earliest designs. Denver spread out below, the mountains rising majestically in the distance, the interplay of natural and human-made grandeur creating a perfect harmony. "Quite a view," came a voice from behind him. Knox turned to find Vern Dempsey, older and grayer but still emanating the same no-nonsense energy. "Worth every penny of these outrageous security contracts." Knox laughed. After Porter's arrest, Vern had transitioned from private investigator to security consultant, with Knox's firm as his first major client. The partnership had been profitable for both of them. "How's retirement treating you?" Knox asked. Vern had officially stepped back from day-to-day operations the previous year, though he still consulted on special projects. "Boring as hell," Vern admitted cheerfully. "My wife's threatening to send me back to work if I reorganize the garage one more time." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, looking out at the city. "You know, I've seen a lot of revenge scenarios play out over the years," Vern finally said. "Most of them end badly for everyone involved. Yours is the rare exception." "I wasn't seeking revenge," Knox demurred. "Just protecting what was mine." Vern snorted. "Sure. And I wasn't helping you sabotage Porter Kendrick's house with those structural assessment devices." Knox's lips twitched. "I prefer to think of it as accelerated architectural karma. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night," Vern chuckled. "Point is, most men in your position would have been consumed by it. The rage, the plotting, the execution, it changes people, and rarely for the better. But you managed to use it without letting it use you." "I had my moments," Knox admitted. "There were times I wanted to do much worse than what I did." "But you didn't," Vern pointed out. "You kept the end goal in focus, protecting your kids, securing their future. The destruction of Porter Kendrick was just a means to that end, not the purpose itself." Before Knox could respond, the observation deck doors opened, and River appeared, slightly out of breath. "Dad, there you are?" "They want to do the official toast and building dedication. Everyone's waiting." "Coming," Knox assured him, exchanging a final nod with Vern before following his son back to the gala. The formal ceremony was brief but moving. Knox spoke eloquently about sustainable architecture and community responsibility before unveiling the building's dedication plaque. Rather than bearing his own name as many had expected, it read simply, "For W&R, the future belongs to those who build it." Afterward, as the celebration continued around him, Knox found himself surrounded by his inner circle. River and his girlfriend Sophia, Willow and her partner Danielle, Vern and his wife Marina, even Bridget and Howard had joined the informal gathering. To the Ascendant, River proposed, raising his champagne glass. And to the man who created it. To family, Willow amended, her eyes meeting Knox's across the circle. "The one we choose to build." Knox raised his own glass, looking at the faces around him, some bound by blood, others by choice or circumstance, all connected through the complex architecture of human relationship. The structure he had rebuilt from the ruins of betrayal wasn't perfect. It had irregular angles and unexpected supports, asymmetrical features that would never appear in a traditional family blueprint. But like his most daring professional designs, it was beautiful in its uniqueness, strong in its authenticity, and built to last through any storm. "To building what matters," Knox said simply, completing the toast. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the cleaning crews had begun their work, Knox stood alone in the center of the Ascendant's soaring atrium. The space was designed to capture the first light of dawn, transforming ordinary morning sunlight into an extraordinary experience for everyone who entered. Tomorrow, the building would officially open to the public. New stories would unfold within its walls, new connections formed, new possibilities created. Life would go on, as it always did, with or without Porter Kendrick's bitterness, with or without Bridget's regrets, with or without the pain of the past. Knox Ballard had built monuments of glass and steel that would outlast him by decades. But his true legacy stood on 2 feet, not concrete foundations. Willow and River, who carried forward not just his name or his features, but the core understanding that had sustained him through the darkest days. That when the structures we rely on fail us, we must become architects of our own salvation. Some men forgave betrayal. Others collapsed beneath its weight. Knox Ballard had done neither. He had instead calculated its load-bearing capacity, determined its structural weaknesses, and designed its systematic demolition, not out of vengeance alone, but as the necessary first step in building something stronger in its place. The final inspection was complete. The work had passed every test, and the architect, surveying all he had created, found it good.